What are attorney John Whitehead's perspectives on the critical importance of civil liberties in America today? Join Richard Ebeling and me and John Whitehead in this week's Libertarian Angle as we examine that question. Hi, I'm Jacob Hornberger, president of the Future of Freedom Foundation, and welcome to this week's special episode of the Libertarian Angle, which is co-hosted by my co-host, Richard Ebeling, professor of economics at the Citadel. As part of our ongoing series on the critical importance of civil liberties, we have a very special guest, John Whitehead, president and founder of the Rutherford Institute. Let me give him a short introduction. Uh, John is one of the premier defenders of civil liberties in the country and actually in our lifetime. He is a writer, a speaker, and an attorney. He founded the Rutherford Institute in 1982. He's received many accolades and awards for his work defending civil liberties, including the Hungarian Medal of Freedom, the Milner S. Ball Lifetime Achievement Award for his integrity in defending civil liberties, and many others. He got his BA and his law degree both from the University of Arkansas. His articles have been published in many law reviews, such as the Emory Law Journal, the Pepperdine Law Review, Washington and Lee Law Review, and many, many others. He has filed several amicus briefs before the U.S. Supreme Court. He's the author of two fantastic books, maybe more, I'm not sure, but these two I highly recommend: Battlefield America, The War on the American People, and his award winning A Government of Wolves, The Emerging American Police State. He and his wife Nisha co-author a weekly article that we publish here at the Future of Freedom Foundation that I cannot recommend too highly. It is an absolutely fantastic weekly analysis of what is occurring here in America, especially with respect to the destruction of our civil liberties. And he writes these analyses whether we're dealing with a Democratic regime or a Republican regime. John, it is a great honor to have you back here at the Future of Freedom Foundation. Thank you so much for taking the time to share your perspectives with us. Take it away.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, I'm greatly concerned. Like you say, I've written a number of books on this topic, and from many years ago, actually, I've written over 30 books, and they've tried to define what's going on in society. And I've seen it incredibly decline for religious freedom, uh, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, and all the things. And just the fact of being an American today, because people are coming to us. We handle quite a few cases. In fact, we have, I think, 8 now dealing with, and before the Supreme Court on a number of these issues, working with groups across the country. And I mean, when I have people calling me saying they're afraid to walk down the street in certain cities now because of ICE agents, the way they're slamming people to the ground and things like that. What I saw in Chicago was totally frightening with the helicopters, Black Hawk helicopters landing on buildings, grabbing children, tying them up, all the things that we're seeing across the country. When I saw that, I said, and then I heard the government actually referring to America as a battlefield. And I'm going, wait a second, maybe the government should read the book, Battlefield America. It's a warning against this. And so we're definitely moving into that battlefield mode. One thing that I saw years ago when I first saw the video that came out of the Pentagon, it was called the 2030 video, and it was about the coming future of America. And it actually predicted America would be breaking down, and yet it had to impose martial law. And since Trump's been into office, it's amazing how quickly that's moved. It's almost like he's saying, hey, I like this movie here. I'm gonna put it into play in the American system. And what I'm seeing today is just totally with his new MSPM memo he put out recently about it's called the National Security Presidential Memo, but where he says if you're anti-American, anti-capitalist, anti-Christian, or whatever, you're basically someone that needs to be watched or someone that needs to be arrested, and they're moving in that direction. Basically, what's being said by our government today, which is what the founding fathers fought against. If you had Thomas Jefferson today, he would look us in the eye and say, "You people are idiots for doing this. What are you doing?" I mean, to give you a quote from Thomas Jefferson, he says, "Rebellion to tyrants is obedience to God. And I have sworn upon the altar of God eternal hostility against every form of tyranny over the mind of men." When you have ICE agents surrounding people, not even letting them go here, not letting them go there, wearing masks up over their faces, I'll be honest with you, as much as I predicted on what was happening in America, I never thought we'd see government agents walking around with masks on their faces arresting people. That's just shocking. And not talking to people and pointing their fingers, pointing guns, and things like that. Uh, um, I saw it coming. And again, I was trying to warn people with the two books you just mentioned, The Government of Wolves and Battlefield America. But with the rise of SWAT team raids on homes, I was just 2,000 annually in America in the 1980s, up to 80,000 annually. And then about 4 or 5 years ago, it broke into and arresting veterans in their homes, shooting people, killing up 500 dogs a day. The police doing that, dressed in armor gear. And I said, what's that for? And the more I looked at it, I said, are they getting us ready for something? Are they preparing us for a future of armed control? And to me, that's exactly where we're headed. I mean, you can disagree with it, but all you have to do is see what's happening around the country. And um, again, it's going to be a very difficult thing to turn back now because people are becoming more accustomed to seeing it. And when they do that, if they're not pushing back and not fighting against it, but here's the thing: if you try to fight against it today, they're walking up and choking people again, throwing them down on the ground. Something that, again, the people who started this country would say, "You're idiots. What are you doing?" And we're allowing it to happen. Um, the other thing that's sweeping over us, and I wrote a book in 1986 called The End of Man when I first saw it, and people joked and made fun of me when I first put it out. It was about AI, the emerging AI, the end of man. When I saw it, and it started a long time ago, folks. I mean, I kept warning people, AI is coming, AI is coming. Now with AI basically running the show, and it is in many, many ways, we're all becoming basically algorithms. And it's going to be very difficult to fight the fact that you're not guilty of something if you've been tagged with saying a certain word, and anti-capitalism, anti-American, anti-Christian. And the other thing that's really bothered me is that how many of the people in the religious community now have lined up and are agreeing with all this, basically. Let's get rid of these people, get rid of these folks. I think a lot of it has to do with racism, by the way. I mean, immigration is a good tool to use if you want to get a bunch of people up against somebody. And the reflections, by the way, again, I wrote about in both of those books that you mentioned, is the rise of Hitler. Okay, you get a certain populace that needs to be put away, needs to be put in concentration camps or wherever they're going to put them, detention camps, you want to call it that, and you know, get rid of them. But sooner or later, it comes down the line. Bang, 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 bang. It comes back to you. And that's what we're seeing today. And with over $71 million now been spent since the day Trump came into office, over 8 months, over $71 million has been spent on ICE agents with guns, automatic rifles, and equipment. I got a question for people out there. Why? What happened? Are we being invaded by Russia? China? Yeah, we are basically through their AI stuff, but are we actually having physical troops land on the shore? So who is the enemy? The American people is the enemy. Battlefield America, the war on the American people. And many people are falling for it. They're not saying a thing about um, this. They're saying, well, President Trump is this wonderful guy and all this. But I'll be honest with you, when I'm watching Trump talk and stuff like that, and I grew up seeing really intelligent presidents be able to give a speech, talk, and respond, and seeing Trump talk, he's having trouble getting words out of his mouth. We're not dealing with somebody who's really running the government. So the question is, who's really running the government, folks? And for years now we've been talking about this idea of a deep state. Uh, Mussolini called fascism, by the way, corporatism. And uh, it was the same thing that happened to Adolf Hitler in Nazi Germany. The corporations hired him basically to run the country. And there's a good book by an author named Bertram Gross who documents all this. And the fact is that we're being run by a bunch of corporations who make a tremendous amount of money. They work with Mr. Trump. You have groups like the Palantir, who are basically been supporting ICE agents, by the way, giving them equipment and information through their intelligence services. And I'm really concerned. I'm trying to get Americans to wake up. And uh, I like protests, but we have to have intelligent protests against some of this stuff. And listen, if you go back and study early America, and again, I'm telling people this, when I hear public school teachers saying that the Declaration of Independence is too radical a document to be taught in schools, I'm going, whoa, wait a minute here. It's the foundation, folks. You know, and if you read the Declaration of Independence, boy, is it a butt-kicking document. It basically says if they're not defending Americans, throw them out, get rid of them. You know, and that's why we had that rebellion then, a rebellion that gave us the Constitution. And a Constitution, by the way, that many of the early Americans didn't like because it didn't have a Bill of Rights. Patrick Henry, you know, we all give me liberty or give me death. They were ready to fight the Constitution. That's how radical they were. We need more people like that today. And I'm telling people, introduce your kids to the Bill of Rights. When I'm talking to people today and saying, give me the five freedoms of the First Amendment, I spoke to a group of lawyers not too long ago, well, a couple of years ago, Harvard, you know, types and whatever. And was 140 lawyers in the room. In the middle of a speech about the cases we were handling, I said, by the way, I got a strange question to ask. Can any lawyer in this room give me the five freedoms of the First Amendment? Not one lawyer. One started to raise his hand, and I was going to point to it. He put it down real quick. My wife said she was in the back of the room. They were debating it. I'm going, wait a minute. You're debating the First Amendment and you're a lawyer. And I had this one student who came part of our intern program a couple of years ago, and she just says, it just blows my mind. And I said, she's at a big university, by the way, I won't say which one, because they're all very similar. But she said her professor announced at the beginning of their constitutional law class, there's one subject matter we'll not be learning this year. That's the First Amendment. And I went, wait a minute. The basis of all freedom, freedom of the press, freedom of religion, freedom of speech, assemble, protest, and petition the government for redress of grievances. That's it, folks. That's what we need. And one thing that the government hates today, and that's one thing I see with all this AI stuff, they're going to try to do away with people thinking and free speech. With all this PC and stuff that we've seen lately, political correctness. Because here's the key. Free speech is essential to freedom. It makes people think. If you only have one idea or two ideas you can give people, that maybe they'll go somewhere and do something. But if you're not allowed to challenge them, challenge the government, standing from the government buildings, I mean, if people who follow the work of the Rutherford Institute, we've defended every type of person who believes in free speech. And I've said this many times. There are some people we've defended I couldn't eat dinner with. I'd get an upset stomach. But they have a right to say what they believe and to say it clearly. And like I said, we need today people who are rebels. And a rebel is a good word. And people say, well, what do you mean rebel? I mean, rebel is someone who cares about other people. They're willing to get out there, stand in front of a government official, challenge them for the sake of saving freedom for the rest of the people of America. And so that's what I've been trying all my life, is to build people who are willing to take a stand, not be afraid of the government, and get out there and fight for freedom. Without it, folks, and when you don't have kids today who are not studying the Bill of Rights in public schools and stuff like that, what kind of class of people are we raising? You know, and I'm really worried that the future is going to be where when you say, what's our freedoms? They're going to look at you like, what's the word freedom mean? It's like George Orwell's 1984, you know. Uh, Everybody is distracted, and he said it really good in one of his interviews. He said it's beer, uh, entertainment, sports on TV screens. That's how you control the populace. And I'm telling people, listen, the average American supposedly spends 150 hours a month on screen devices. I'm asking them to please give us 1/3 of those hours for freedom and get out there and get involved in your local governments. If you need to go to DC, get friends together and take stands for freedom, because that is our only hope, folks. The hope is in the people. Power to the people, right on, as John Lennon once said, and doing marches and stuff like that. It does work, but we need more people to get involved and fight for freedom. That's exactly what we need. Without it, I'm afraid our country, we don't have very much longer. When you have these masked agents running around, they're going to be at your door someday if you say the wrong word.
All right. Let's open it up for some. Thank you for the great presentation. Richard, I'll turn it over to you.
Now, as Jacob would tell you, sometimes when we have guests on, I like to play the devil's advocate, if I may. And it's merely because
Well, the devil has a right to speak too, but go ahead.
It's just that we would hope that people would tune in to this thing that we do. And it wouldn't just be people who agree with us, but some
Yeah.
people who might hold other views. And in a sense, by my asking the kind of questions that I'm going to start off with, how they can be answered
Okay.
from our more libertarian or classical liberal perspective. Many conservatives who are sympathetic or even supportive of Trump's policies might say the following. Those ICE agents are on the streets because there are laws on the books defining who's a legal immigrant and who's an illegal immigrant. And you may disagree with the law, you may oppose the law, but as you were saying, that's the role of people going to Washington and trying to persuade their congressmen or their senators to a change or abolish a law.
Yeah.
And at the same time, since they're just doing their jobs given the current laws, you also see a lot of these demonstrators, protesters, angrily, at least according to some of the things you see on television or papers, aggressively or even in instances of violently, who in fact don't really believe in freedom. They're on the left. They're Antifa. Their goals is some type of overthrowing of America and setting up of a socialist government or a semi-socialist government of some sort that would be no more respectful of civil liberties of the types of than the type of criticisms that you or I would make of the Trump administration.
Oh, so I'm supposed to answer that. Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I think that if you have socialist views, great. If you have anti-socialist views, great. If you have anti-capitalist views, great. It was down the American. Down the anti-American, whatever you want. Anti-religion, whatever you want. That's what I'm saying is, and speaking out and challenging people creates at least a little bit of combat in their mind, and that's what we want. We want combat in their mind, so that they'll be thinking and go, well, maybe I should do a little research or go think here. And I agree 100%. Like I said, the people I've defended over the 40 years of the Rutherford Institute, I would have trouble eating when, like I said, I get an upset stomach. But they have a right to say it. And I will defend them 100%. And that's what I like to see. I like to see people out there. Here's the question I don't like is for them to be afraid to say it. When you have someone with a huge mask on and guns and all the stuff they have, it gets a little nervous out there, folks. And I would say that if the government doesn't have a reason for being out there, all ready to blow somebody away. I know some people get violent. That's right. And that's what the First Amendment says, peaceful protest, not violent protest. And I tell people that don't be violent. No. Get out there and say what you want to say, do it, and do it peacefully. Be consistent with it. And that way we can make people think, and maybe there's an alternative here. Maybe an ICE agent will say, maybe I shouldn't have slammed that person down like I did, or whatever. Maybe I shouldn't be landing on Chicago buildings and Black Hawk helicopters. Uh, because that is a battlefield. And I've heard some of the government agents actually saying some of the cities are battlefields. Well, where did that all of a sudden start, the battlefield? And I'll be honest with you, I think a lot of it is provoked by government agents because that's how they make their living. I mean, when you have ICE getting just in 8 months $71 million to buy guns and other equipment, that's how they stay in business. They've got to have somebody out there they got to poke and push down.
I think you hit the nail on the head, John, on freedom of speech, that the real test of a free society is not whether responsible or popular speech is, quote, permitted. It's whether the despicable speech, the most despicable speech, is protected.
Yes.
If you live in a society where only responsible speech is permitted, that's not a free society.
Well,
And one of the best examples of this, when I was a lawyer in my early days, and when I was in my 20s, maybe early 30s, practicing law, I learned about the ACLU's defense of Nazi marchers in Skokie, Illinois.
yeah, I remember that.
I was so impressed by that. I mean, because they did it out of principle that if we're not going to defend this despicable speech, then we're not defending civil liberties or freedom of speech. And they lost a lot of donors. Well, I joined the ACLU. I became the ACLU rep in my hometown because of that, because they understood what you're talking about is what genuine freedom of speech is all about.
Yeah. And we're in, I don't know how many cases in the ACLU right now, amicus briefs, I guess 8 or 9. They contact us. They know what we stand for. And yeah, free speech across the board is very important. And like I said, it can be despicable. It would be something you wouldn't want. I'll give you an example. I won't say where, but these two fellows decided they wanted to fight the government, and no one seemed to be listening. They couldn't get anybody to work with them, so they got a projector and set out in front of a public building and projected on the wall F Trump, F Biden. That was while Biden was in his last year. Of course, the police and people reacted very unappreciative of what they were doing. And so they contacted us and we defended them and won the case on free speech grounds. I don't think that's a good idea, no. But once you start stamping out free speech, free thinking, I mean, that's what it's all about. And when I saw, again, like I said, when I saw the ICE agents and what they look like, I was going, does that mean that anybody that disagrees with the government is a combatant? Is that what they are? Are we all combatants if we disagree with the government? And that's basically what we're getting labeled now, combatants, if you disagree with the government. And if you're out on the streets protesting, it's good to see people get active. I mean, protests we saw not too long ago, last weekend or whatever, over whatever Trump was doing, No Kings protest. Some of it I looked at it, some of it looked at it kind of funny or whatever, but it's better than people sitting on their butts, watching TV, getting programmed by the media. And I tell people, be careful about the media. Carl, a number of the great journalists came out early, folks, after Nixon. Carl Bernstein, by the way, Bernstein and Woodward, and said that he was shocked when he started working with the mainstream media that he saw government agents working with the various publications and stuff. We've been in a very tight network for a long time. And, again, in the 60s and whatever. And if you look back into the McCarthy era, and I kind of remind people of the McCarthy era, and they look at me and like, McCarthy, what's a McCarthy? Well, there was a guy named Joseph McCarthy, who way back in the 50s was holding these House Un-American Activities hearings. If you said the wrong word or did this or that, they were calling people to examine them. You had the FBI working with them through their COINTEL program, looking up people because they wrote a letter. Frank Sinatra wrote a letter supporting a candidate. He became under investigation. Martin Luther King, go down the list of all these people that they were watching. and trying to control. And so we've circled back again. We've circled back where the government now investigates you because you have a certain political viewpoint. And I see that now. You know, I'm not super anti-Trump or anything like that. I just don't like the policies where government says we're watching you because you disagree with us or whatever it might be, and you're saying it on social media. I'll be honest with you. I've had FBI agents and others visit me over the years and talk to me about these things. They're concerned about what they're seeing in some of their programs. So, you know, when you have people like Pete Seeger, I don't know if you guys remember Pete Seeger, the great folk singer. Yeah. He was a good friend of mine. And I thought it was really, I said, how do you deal with this? He said, when I went before the House on American Activities, everybody was doing the Fifth Amendment. I did the First Amendment. He read the First Amendment to him. And I thought that's really a good idea. Yeah, be innovative. You can be innovative, and make them think. I mean, most of these people going, the First Amendment, what's that? Because people don't know anything about the Constitution hardly. Like I say, when I talk to them, we needed to be teaching the Constitution strongly. And I think if we did that, we probably wouldn't have all this stuff we're seeing today. Because if people know how to peacefully protest in their local communities, here across the country, we can preserve freedom. But again, I tell people, how does the Constitution begin? We, the people, do ordain and establish. So who's the government? We, the people. Those people are representatives in Washington, D.C., by the way, who make a lot of money off of what they do. And a lot of them are there for the money. I'm sorry. I've sued out in and out of Washington, D.C. for over 40 years. And I've had some really good government officials meet me and say, I had one guy, I said, you take a walk with me? He threw his phone away and said, let's walk down the street. I want to tell you something. We walked down the street in Washington, D.C. in a case I was involved. He just said, John, it's all about money. Money, money, money in D.C. Getting back to Mussolini, Hitler, what was it about? Corporatism. And the people who run the large corporations, what's their main goal? Is it for freedom of speech or is it to make money?
If I can sort of pick up what you said about, people not having a historical memory like McCarthyism. There's a lot of elements of this that, if I can just mention in line with that thought, is that there was a famous libertarian female author back in the 1940s named Rose Wilder Lane.
Yeah.
And she once was a lefty, a communist herself, but she recounted that when she was traveling around Europe, she was in Hungary. This would have been in the 1920s or early 1930s. And she was acting as a journalist at the time, and she was with some Hungarian police whose job was, if this sounds familiar, to go into cafes and restaurants and just randomly ask to see people's papers. Are you a citizen? Have you a legitimate right to be here? And people were nervous. They would be pulling out their papers. If their papers weren't in order, they could be subject to immediate arrest and being thrown into jail, and God knows what happened to them afterwards. So back then, when Rose Wilder Lane was talking about, well, look at an authoritarian regime like Admiral Horthy's government in Hungary of that time, Americans would be shocked. What do you mean you have to carry around your papers? What do you have to mean you have to prove you're a citizen? It shows how far we've come since that type of American sense of, what do you mean? I have to show my identification. The other one is that the ICE agents, you constantly hear that they have quotas. They want to round up 1,000 people a day or more. Well, that's not new either. In the 1930s, in the Soviet Union, there were quotas in rounding up people. Just like the Central Plan had a quota for so much tonnage of steel or iron or building bricks. The thing is that the KGB, the known as the NKVD, had quotas from Stalin, and the quotas was rounding people up in the first degree. Those were the asserted enemies of the people who you had a quota who were to be executed, and the other was in the second degree. And the second degree was the quotas of rounding up people to be sent to the Gulag labor camps to be slave labor. So yes, quotas to round people up. You could be arrested in that time merely because you're on the street without your papers. And you would be gone to a camp in Siberia, and your family, your relatives will never know what happened to you. So and it, people would be shocked if they, yeah, that's the Soviet Union. That's what they did under Stalin. That's evil. But to now expect to see that, whether formally or informally, they have quotas to just find people to round up and imprison and then possibly deport. So all of these are authoritarian or even totalitarian techniques and goals and attitudes that have snuck into the American society that people would and should have been aghast at just decades ago.
Yeah, but like I said, there's so much infatuation with the leader today. But again, as I said, and again, when I studied the Soviet history, and people were getting rounded up and put in camps for a certain painting they did, or writing a poem. Alexander Solzhenitsyn, yeah, people like that, the brilliant thinkers, and uh, they don't want brilliant thinkers. They don't want thinkers. They want followers. They want people that ante up with their money. And that's basically where, again, where we're at today. I agree 100% with that. And it's, uh, again, I get people who write me daily saying, John, where's your brain at? Well, how can you and your wife write such a commentary? I mean, Trump is the most unbelievably great man who ever lived and stuff like that. And I'm saying, not really, not really. He's not the greatest man who ever lived. But they said it about every emperor. Now we see with what he's doing in the White House, building this new ballroom or whatever. When I read about Hitler, Hitler created well, you had to go to his office, by the way, or his, whatever you want to call it. You had to walk like 100 yards down these big hallways and open the door, and there's the little guy at the desk. Um, they want you to be awed. Oh, wow, look at this guy. I mean, we live in a little home. This guy lives in a mansion. Look at him. And look what he's done for us. The question is, what has he done for but caused the country to go into a semi-terror mode and worry about, what's going to happen? And I tell people this: if you're worried about your children, folks, your grandchildren today, you better wake up. I mean, waking up is the key here, and open your eyes. It's like the John Carpenter movie, They Live, We Sleep. Wake up, see who's out there, and again, they can take important steps to try to fight it. I mean, I'm not going to go hide and not write a commentary or work on a book that challenges government thinking, because my job as a human being, again, like I say, a rebel is someone who cares about other people, and they want to make sure that everybody has rights. And, it's like these Christians that come up to me, or whatever you want to call them, evangelicals, and they're disagreeing, saying, how could Donald Trump's this great Christian man. I'm going, well, would Jesus do this? What did Jesus say? Do unto others, you have them do unto you. Love your brothers. Don't treat them badly. That's what got him in trouble. You do the same thing today, people get irritated with you. They don't want to hear that. They'd rather, when the news is reporting, certain news channels, it's sort of like, good, the ICE agents are throwing people to the ground, whatever they're doing. SWAT team raids and pushing that kind of stuff. I'll be honest with you, I think it's a form of evil. It's the way to chain people and control them. And that's what they want to do. They don't treat us like non-humans.
You mentioned the wearing of the mask, which I'm shocked at as well as you. But don't you think that this is part of instilling fear in a society? That's the core element of tyranny. If you see fear, that's the core of the realm. Is fear, is making people afraid. And it seems to me that when you've got masked agents that wield the authority to grab somebody off the street and essentially disappear them and never have to identify themselves, give their badge number and so forth, that does instill fear in a society.
Yeah, well, that great Hitler quote, he said, fear is the way to control people. Basically, that's the quote. And fear does. Fear makes people want to, I got to have me a protector. The problem with the protector, though, if the protector doesn't have a sense of freedom and morality and all the things we need, that protector is going to be at your door someday if you say the wrong word. And with the AI today and algorithms and all that stuff, listen, everything we're doing is being watched. Our TVs are listening, our phones are listening. Uh, we are algorithms, folks. We live in an algocracy. And the government loves that because they can watch everything you're doing, where you're going to eat, where you're going to walk, what are you doing? You got that phone, it can track you. And when I go into restaurants, I've always, and today I look around with people. There's two parents and three kids sitting at a table. They all have their phones. They're staring at them. I want to go, wake up, get off your phone, talk to one another, be humans, be good people, treat each other right, get off the damn phones. And because that's the way that they're controlling us now. It's an AI. It can come across as I got all these benefits and stuff like that. And of course, there's benefits to it. But you have to be careful because who's running the show? The same people that are running the show are working with the government, folks. Palantir, think about it. Palantir has been working with ICE for a while now, giving them all this information on this person, that person, where they're going and what they're doing, and how they need to be watched.
As an attorney, you obviously have a very good understanding of the concepts of due process of law and habeas corpus, which we hear about a lot in the context of what's going on. Can you give a rather short summary of why due process and habeas corpus are so critically important parts of a free society?
Yes. It means the government has to do their job. In other words, uh, you have to be allowed to exercise your freedoms. You need to be allowed to exercise them in courts, and be treated with uh, dignity by our Constitution. And that's the key. The Constitution is the key to our society, especially the Bill of Rights. When James Madison, who wrote the Bill of Rights, said it, he said we ought to mistrust all those in power. And what that means is, it's if the government's has a case, they need to prove that case adequately. But the point is that you need to be defended adequately as well, and you need your rights protected. But here's the point I want to make: the government's supposed to be there to protect your rights. And let me go back again what I said earlier: we, the people, do ordain. We are the government, and we need to push the government forward in defending our rights and making sure that if we're in a court system or whatever, we're being treated like anybody else should be treated, and that's like a human being and equally. And what I'm seeing today with the government locking people up, put alligator Alcatraz. When I first saw that, and some of these places they put up around the country, these detention camps, I went, well, I read about this years ago. They were erecting. I had a former CIA agent who said, John, they're erecting detention camps on military bases across the country. I don't know what for. And I said, well, what do you think they're for? He said there's a future coming where they're going to need to use those. And then when I saw that a lot of the prisons today are private prisons run by people who make money off the product, I can see why they would like a lot of immigrants locked up and working for them and working for the corporations. And so that's the key.
Richard?
Yeah. The other thing I'd like your thoughts on is that, you were just saying that we, the people, that the government, that we're supposed to be the government and limiting them. But I wonder if that's not has become part of the soothing problem, in that once you believe that you are the government, then it easily becomes a trap for many people that anything that the government does is just a reflection of our will, what we want or need. And therefore, to oppose the government in rounding people up because they're defined as illegal immigrants, or on any of these other bases in which Trump wants to sort of broaden these categories of people subject to surveillance and arrest. This is just an expression of the government doing our will. In many ways, it's the democratic fallacy. It was easier to say, well, there's the king and his lords of the manor, his aristocrats, and they're dominating and controlling and exploiting everyone else in the society. So the few against the many. But once we say we the people, we are the government, and we're electing the representatives, it becomes a catch-22. How can I oppose it when through the democratic process is a reflection of the general will of which I've been a participant? So this seems to be a problem, and that means that civil liberties themselves can be subjugated and subject to abridgment following that same peculiar and perverse logic.
What I mean by we the people are the ones that should be running the government. And I'm going back to that rebel faith and stuff like that. It means that we should be really active in government, not sitting on our butts watching our cell phones all the time, expecting that we're going to be fed. But the problem with that, and you make a good point, if you go back through history, people have always basically gone in step with some kind of emperor or mass leader. And that's the idea the so-called founding fathers has, that maybe we can change this to a certain degree. Again, if you read the Declaration of Independence, it basically says we the people, and boot them out anytime they want to if they're not doing their job. But the problem today is the way we're educated, the way we're trained is to follow along like dogs on a leash. And when you get out there and you start saying, hey, I'm not going to be a dog on a leash, I'm going to fight you to the end to make sure that we in America are going to have freedom and we're going to take stands against it, stuff like that. All of a sudden, you got these ICE agents or people like that coming in to America. And, and the government talking about certain cities being battlefield. And no, what I'm saying is it's a difficult issue. But if there's anything that can be done, it has to be us. And the question is, who else is going to do it? I mean, there are certain representatives, in my opinion, who are good people and do good jobs, and elect better representatives if we can. But the problem we face now, coming down in this future that we have, is that when I talk, like I say, talk to the average American, they have no clue what's going on. The government's there to rule us. Not really. It's not there to rule us. It's there, they represent us and our beliefs. But if the American people become to believe that they're just non-humans that need to be ruled, it's going to be their problem. And the question is, what can we do? And I always say this: education precedes action. Educate. A program like this is good. People should be listening to this program and going, hey, I can do something. Yeah, you can. Most people think there's nothing they can do. That's what they're taught in school. They're taught what? To be rebels. They're not reading the Declaration of Independence. They don't know the First Amendment. Come on. I mean, they don't know the Fourth Amendment. Fourth Amendment is key. It says keep the government out of our homes, unless they got a reason to be there. And many of the cases I've seen with these SWAT team raids is there's no reason for them to be there. They're just crashing the door. They make mistakes. Oh, we're sorry. We didn't mean to shoot that guy. It was a mistake us being there. Well, why did you get a warrant? Huh? Why didn't you get a warrant? So the question is, we can sit on our butts. And like I say, if you care about your children, your grandchildren, time to build a free America, folks.
Yeah, it seems to me is what you're saying is this educational element, is that what is it that Friends of Freedom should really be wanting to educate our fellow citizens to have a restored knowledge of? When we talk about civil liberties, freedom of speech, freedom of press, freedom of religion, freedom of association, as you were beginning, at the beginning when you were talking about what is this, they all derive from the more general notion of the individual having the liberty to not be infringed upon or abused or aggressed again by either a private individual or the government. And that means that that founding principle that is in the Declaration, that each of us has our right to life and our liberty and our implicitly freedom of association and pursuit of happiness through those avenues of liberty and freedom of association. But what is never spoken of when talking about the First Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, everything, is the idea of liberty. Here, when talks about democracy, one hears popularism, authoritarianism. But what is not heard enough is liberty, and why liberty is important, and who has liberty? The individual. Because if you understand that the individual is the distinct human being with liberty,
Yeah.
and that merely the things like in the First Amendment are applications of what the government should not be presumed to ever abridge as an individual's liberty, that would be the educational starting point to get our fellow citizens perhaps to open their eyes a bit.
And you know what liberty is. This is my book, An American Dream. We read just a portion of the Declaration of Independence, which is, I like to read it almost daily because it goes, oh, good, good, good. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That whatever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it and to institute new government. People have always asked me, what does an unalienable right mean? The word unalienable means non-transferable. In other words, if you have rights, they're there always. You can't give them away. They're always there with you. You can hide them or whatever, but when you get ready to exercise them, they're there. And that's the type of stuff we need to start teaching people. Unalienable rights, non-transferable. They're there always, folks. They're given to us by our Creator. And that was part of the American dream when I saw it. People forget this, though. In early America, during the American Revolution, some of the strongest patriots were ministers. I see nothing like that today, hardly. They were called the Black Regiment. They would give a sermon and then open their black robe and have a rifle and be ready to fight. We need more leaders like that. In other words, people who will take a stand. But if the point of your whatever thing you're running is to make money or to get a herd in and talk to them on this day or that day, then it's never going to work. The point of many ministers, I keep telling people, should be to say, get out there and fight for freedom. I mean, they supposedly worship of Jesus Christ, but if you read about Jesus Christ, and I've written books, a few small books about, but I read more closely, a guy who was sticking it right in people's faces, whipping them out of a temple because they were perverting religion. I said, you don't have many people like that today. And if you look at all the churches across the country, that if they were to take a stand just on rights, they could change the country, on the face of the country. There's so many of them. And when I talk to them, they look at me like, okay, who are you? I go, well, I'm him. And I believe in someone who had the guts to be taken to a cross and crucified because he was willing to speak truth to power. And that's the key. Speaking truth to power has its consequences. And most people don't want to suffer the consequences.
What I often fear and find frustrating that my conservative friends, many of whom are truly in their Christian faith,
Yes.
I feel they often forget part of this very message that you find in the Gospels. I will often say to my students when we're talking about basic freedoms, I said, I've read the Gospels, and never once do I find something like the following. Jesus says to someone, follow me. And the fellow says in response, Jesus, you got a great message. But, I have my buddies and I'm going to go get out drinking with them tonight, carouse a little bit. And, in the back room, there's the gambling going on. And I never mind, taking a game of chance. And then above are those loose women. And, the flesh is weak. So you got a great message. I'm sorry, Jesus, I'm not going to follow you. Never once does Jesus say to his disciples, arrest him, 5 to 10 in the big house for not following me. Never once is that in the Gospels. Jesus' point, the foundation of the faith, is that it's a matter of freedom of conscience and freedom of choice.
Yeah.
If you want to follow one path or you want to follow another path. And that's as long as you don't aggress another person, right? You don't kill, you don't steal, you don't cut, bear false witness, you don't lie and cheat. You're free to follow the path you want. You can accept and you can backslide, but you can always be redeemed again. It's a philosophy of individual freedom and choice and voluntarism of the most fundamental matter of conscience. And if that was really once again appreciated by many conservatives, they wouldn't accept and be passively accepting much that the government does in supposedly their name.
Yeah, and I think the key was Jefferson rights, unalienable rights. And who do they come from? The Creator. Look what he's given us. Whoa. All this, he's given us an amazing amount of power. And when you get together in groups and work it, I mean, you can see things change. And we've seen it over the years in some instances. But I think you're right. I just it's it's in us, and I keep saying it. It's in us. We have it. We can do it. We the people can do it, and we the people have the power to do it. But you know, if we're taught to be lazy and we're told that it's okay to be lazy and not fight for freedoms, we're going to lose them. And I'll be truthful with you. The way AI is moving right now, we're going to be wondering what is going on around us. We're going to be looking to our left and our right. Elon Musk said it best. He says people don't get it. They will not get it till they see the robots coming at them down the street. And Musk, who helped Donald Trump put in all that AI stuff that he's doing with Palantir and all those organizations, they know it. So we're at a point in, I think, humanity, if we want to call it that, where humanity's up for grabs. There may not be humans in the true sense of the word too long. When you're talking about putting biochips in people's heads at that point and controlling them, humans are going to become passe. And that's exactly where I think we're headed.
Well, on that insightful note, we'll wrap things up. It's when I hear your words, John, and your words, Richard, as well, they inspire me. And I think that's one of the most important things about speaking truth to power is that you just never know who out there is hearing you and listening to you and getting inspired by your message. And so thank you. And I would highly recommend everybody get on the mailing list, at least the email list of the Rutherford Institute. We link to John's and Nisha's article every week, but you can get it direct in your mailbox from the Rutherford Institute. And John, thank you very much. This has been fantastic. Really
Yes, thank
appreciate
you
it.
for
Thank
joining
you,
this. It's
Richard.
very greatly appreciated.
Thank you, Richard. Jacob.
Okay, next week we've got John Glennon, who y'all know has spoken at FF seminars as well and conferences. The author of what I consider one of the greatest books. I wish every American would read National Security and Double Government by Michael Glennon, professor of law at Tufts University, former counselor to the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. I guarantee you're going to enjoy it as much as the three that we've already presented to you. On that note, we'll wrap things up. Richard, I look forward to seeing you next week. John, thank you again for a great
Thank you,
presentation.
sir. Thank you.